I'll kick it off. Good morning, everyone. Really appreciate everyone taking some time to be with us this morning. My name is Evie Zois Sweeney. I'm a lobbyist with Much More Harrington Smalley and Associates, and we have the privilege of representing the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy. So really grateful for everyone carving out some time. I know it is a particularly busy time of year. There's no shortage of news to cover, and so really grateful for your time this morning. We know the report is worthy and newsworthy, and but I really just wanted to be on record and just express gratitude for you being here today. And with that, I am going to kick it over to our moderator, Tony.
Thank you, Evie. I'm Tony Mangini. I'm the Deputy Executive Director and Chief Operating Officer for the Michigan Municipal League, and I will be serving as moderator today. I do want to let the media folks that are on know that if you have questions, please post those in the chat. We'll be monitoring the chat throughout this, and we'll get to your questions at the end this presentation. I would like to thank the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy for allowing the Michigan Municipal League to serve as host and moderator of this event. The Lincoln Institute is a nonprofit operating foundation founded in 1946 and headquartered in Massachusetts. So they bring a fresh look at the challenges Michigan communities face. As a Michigan-based stakeholder, we welcome the Lincoln Institute's unsolicited and independent examination of Michigan's municipal funding system as discussed in their new research report titled Towards Fiscal Healthy Michigan Local Governments. And this report was funded by the Charles Mott Foundation, so thank you to them for doing this. The League was asked to moderate this news conference due to our nonpartisan role in representing Michigan's communities. There is a link to the full report in the chat, so feel free to access that there. And today you're going to be hearing from three different individuals. First up, you'll hear from Jenna DeAngelo. She's the Associate Director of Local and Regional Fiscal Health at the Lincoln Institute. You'll hear from State Representative Mark Heisinger from Walker, Michigan. And you'll also be hearing from Westland Mayor Bill Wild, who is also the President of the Michigan Municipal League Board of Trustees. I would like to stress that this is a report of a third-party independent research group, and that the Lincoln Institute pursued this research question on their own. Upon the report's conclusion, we were asked to review and partner with the Lincoln Institute on its dissemination. And because of the study's deep and accurate relevancy to our community's ability to provide critical services and improve the quality of their space, we were happy to lend a hand to host and moderate this press discussion with you and the Lincoln Institute. And with that, I will turn it over to our first speaker, Jenna, who will explain the report and its findings and recommendations.
Thank you, Tony. I apologize in advance. I have a little scratchy throat. So the Lincoln Institute has been working on this issue for over a year now. And we initially came in with the idea of identifying ways that state level policies could help improve the fiscal health of Michigan's local governments. And why do we care about local governments? Well, they provide the services and infrastructure that residents see, use, experience every day. So residents' lives are directly affected when local governments don't have the resources they need. So after doing dozens of stakeholder interviews and preliminary research, we decided to focus on 4 issues affecting the fiscal health of local governments in Michigan. And those 4 issues are statutory revenue sharing, property tax limits, local revenue sources, and local government fragmentation. And then from there, we spent several months researching these issues. And you all live and work in Michigan, so these issues are probably not new to you. But what is hopefully interesting and new is how Michigan compares to other states and the empirical evidence, what that says about some of these issues. So in the report, we highlight, like I said, the four main issues. I'll start with statutory revenue sharing, and obviously that's been declining over the past 2 decades in Michigan. And while many other states have cut aid to local governments during and after the Great Recession, Michigan's cuts were considerably larger than those in most other states. But revenue sharing is an important revenue source for local governments in Michigan, especially when you take into account the fact that localities are extremely limited in how they raise revenues from the property tax and other local taxes. which I'll get into more in a moment. So this decline in statutory revenue sharing is most troubling because statutory revenue sharing is distributed to the local governments based on their need. And so the places that are already struggling to raise revenues and deliver services are made even more worse off because statutory revenue sharing is not fully funded. Now for property tax limitations. Michigan has some of the tightest property tax limits in the United States. And this unusual design has contributed to large declines in property tax revenue, both during and after the Great Recession. While most states only have one or maybe two forms of property tax limits, Michigan has three. A few studies have tried to measure and rank the restrictiveness of state tax and expenditure limits. And those three studies ultimately ranked Michigan either second or sixth in restrictiveness. As in many states, local governments in Michigan rely heavily on property taxes to fund their operations. However, the state's limitations on property taxes undermine the stability of the property tax as a revenue source. Now for local revenue options besides the property tax, research has shown that revenue diversification is a determinant of local fiscal stability. Yet local governments in Michigan are prohibited from collecting a variety of taxes and fees that many other states allow their localities to collect. So this results in a lack of revenue diversity, and that hinders local government's ability to adapt to changing economic conditions, like what is going on right now with COVID-19. And the final issue is local government fragmentation. Michigan has a lot of local governments, which results in inefficiencies. And we realize that several localities have engaged in cost-saving measures, such as shared services, but this is not enough to get at the deep inefficiencies that have been ingrained in localities. So for the recommendations, we think that one recommendation that addresses the revenue issue should be coupled with a recommendation that gets at the fragmentation and inefficiencies issue. So for the revenue recommendations, one idea is that we can create a special state fund to distribute state aid to local governments, which is done in several other states like Idaho, Nevada, Ohio. The special state fund would help protect localities from the cuts in state revenue sharing by reinforcing that the funds are set aside for local governments under state law, and they should not be subject to the state budget appropriations process. Another way to ensure statutory revenue sharing is fully funded is to increase the sales tax or increase a different state level tax that boosts state revenues, such that the state does not need to dip into the sales tax revenues that is meant for local governments. The National Conference of State Legislatures maintains a database that chronicles all state tax actions, and it's a great place to see what other states are doing. We included in the report just a few examples of states that have recently increased a state level tax. Another recommendation is that Michigan should allow its local governments to raise mill rates without an override vote when the tax base slowly declines or grows slowly or declines. This will give localities the flexibility they need to adjust to changing circumstances. The next recommendation deals with local revenue sources. We think giving every city, township, village, county, the ability to levy another tax would likely exacerbate fiscal disparities among Michigan jurisdictions, because municipalities with low revenue raising capacity often lack the tax base for new local taxes in the first place. So we think counties in Michigan should be given the authority to levy and collect a new tax or fee. Our report details a couple different approaches that would follow to make this possible, and that would mean either the county takes over another service that traditionally the other local governments have provided, or the county distributes the money and sort of has its own revenue sharing program with the townships, villages, and cities. Our final recommendation deals with the government fragmentation and inefficiencies that our research found. And because of the potential downfalls of consolidation, we don't want to recommend that. So instead, we're recommending two approaches based out of the Government Finance Officers Association research. And we want the state to encourage localities to engage in one of or both of these approaches. One is called the networked enterprise, where the local government connects public, private, and nonprofit resources in the pursuit of a shared objective, such as reducing poverty or improving graduation rates. The other approach is the government as a platform model, where the local government acts as a coordinator by plugging in the most effective service providers of basic public services, regardless of whether the provider is a private business, nonprofit, or another entity. Whoever can get the job done efficiently and meet the standards that the town or city sets forth, they should be able to do the job. So to wrap it up, state officials have to remember that local governments provide the services and infrastructure that residents and businesses rely on. Implementing policies that make it easier for local government to do their job ultimately benefits the state of Michigan as a whole and the people and businesses that comprise it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenna. I now have the privilege of welcoming Representative Mark Heisinger. He's the former mayor of Walker. Representative Heisinger also serves on the House Appropriations Committee, where he is chair of the General Government Subcommittee. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Anthony, and thank you, Jenna, for your nice summary. It's really my pleasure to serve in the legislature, but my background is really finance and accounting. And I think to help provide some better context of my experience, it's important to understand that I worked as a mayor prior to working in the legislature. I've always been a strong advocate for local control, and I know how important it is to have revenue sharing. And as mayor, I chaired the finance committee, and so I had extensive experience trying to balance the budgets. It's no doubt that revenue sharing dollars are critical. They're critical to our local communities to provide that safety net, whether it's police, fire, and I think a lot of times people oftentimes miss the fact that local roads, some of that funding comes from the revenue sharing, and everybody wants to make sure that we have strong local governments. I think one thing different about the city of Walker, where I was mayor, was just a small handful of other small communities across the state. The city of Walker had the foresight many years ago to implement a city income tax, and that tax was critical for our community to continue to thrive. As the report indicates, the property tax revenues are really tightly constrained due to the Headley Amendment. And I think one of the important things for me when I was mayor during that time period is that as the GASB requirements came out, that made it more clear, and for governments to show that they were being more transparent, they actually had to finally disclose what their positions look like from a long-term liability perspective. And during that time, I think that there was many communities across the state of Michigan that were disappointed to see that their number was large and looming. And I think that exacerbating that factor was the fact that many communities across the state, especially smaller communities, are seeing a decrease in population as we continue to see this transition from smaller farms and agrarian economy moving towards the urban core. The challenges are only going to increase. One thing I'll just recommend or talk about is the fact that report talks about fragmented governments across the state. And when I think about my experience as mayor, one of the things that really was valuable, and it's very difficult to articulate, but working together closely with neighboring communities is really critical. The states try to create different policies, whether it's subterranean infrastructure or other things, but it's really about a culture that makes organizations and communities work better and to build stronger neighborhoods and urban communities as well. So we had a group called the Grand Valley Metro Council, really took best practices for collaborations, and we worked on local projects, whether it's road, sewer, water, and even in the city of Walker, we had a shared service for a judge. We had not enough volume for one judge, but we had a chamber, and a neighboring community in Granville, they had a chamber too, and the judge shared that. And so we work very collaboratively, and we also work collaboratively with bigger communities like the city of Grand Rapids. So fast forward, now I serve in the legislature, and it's always easy when you're at the local level and you're looking for more revenue sharing. But from a legislative perspective, and being on the appropriations committee and chairing the general government subcommittee on appropriations, it's never as easy as you might think. And earlier this year, I co-chaired a work group looking at what works with revenue sharing, what doesn't work with it, and what can we do to enhance dollars from the state in the most efficient manner. Unfortunately, when COVID struck, our work group was just starting, and we had to disband because the implications of the budget were very grim. And that doesn't mean this problem goes away, and in fact, it's probably exacerbated by the COVID. But I think that it's important to remember that as a chair of General Government Subcommittee on Appropriations, I've advocated for steady growth for revenue sharing, and at the minimum to maintain that. And I think that when we look back to the lost decade, when Michigan suffered dire consequences from losing almost 1 million people, it's taken a long time to get back to that. And it's important that we recognize that those local governments are the backbone of our communities and the backbone of our state. So I've always been a strong proponent for local government, and will continue to work my Senate counterparts to ensure that revenue sharing doesn't see cuts, and want to continue to look for unique ways to enhance that revenues. And I thank the Lincoln Institute for the work that they've done. I found the report to be very informative. And in fact, I think it'd be great to have the Lincoln Institute present their findings for a future session at some point in time for the General Government Subcommittee. So thanks for your good work, and we'll continue to work to try to find ways to make dollars flow to the local communities, to be efficient with our hardworking taxpayer dollars, and to remember our roots. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Representative. Really appreciate that. I'd like to now introduce Westland Mayor Bill Wild, who is also president of the Michigan Municipal League Board of Trustees. Mayor?
Thank you, Tony, and thank you for the other panelists, and Representative Heisinger. Thank you for your work at both the state level and the local level. We at the Michigan Municipal League have been saying for years now that our state's funding of local communities is fundamentally broken and must be fixed. In this report by an independent, nonpartisan organization, and I think it's worthy to repeat that it's not even based in the state of Michigan, it adds to the mounting research and evidence that validates the Michigan Municipal League's long-standing call for municipal finance reform. It's the second in-depth study released in just the last few days that shows how Michigan's communities have been underfunded for more than 2 decades. For decades, I've heard state policymakers from both sides of the aisle say that communities need to manage what they have better. And I understand that, and I can agree with that. I'm on board with that, and I have been. And I think that most municipal leaders across the state of Michigan understand that and work towards that the best they can. But you can only do that for so long. You have to remember that deferred maintenance starts to add up. You know, there's only so many patches you can put on your leaky roof. Eventually, no matter how well you manage it, you need to invest in a new roof, not just for health and safety, but to save valuable time and money in the long run, so that you have the ability to address other issues that require attention. The people who live in our communities, they need this investment. It's time to do it. In the city of Westland, I've been fortunate to be mayor since 2007. So I came in before the Great Recession, and I had to work with my city council members and my union leaders and all of our employees and our residents to downsize our city operations to come in line with the new revenues that we were seeing after the housing burst. And it took us a while, but we worked through it and we came out stronger. We were a smaller government. We actually came through the recession. We worked with our unions and got a lot of concessions on our health care and pension obligations and even payroll. And we slowly built up. We had a 3-year balanced budget. So we thought that we were in pretty good shape, but with this continued disinvestment and state shared revenue, the problem with that is that 3-year budget now has eroded away and we're back down to a 1-year budget. I like to think that we're still being fiscally responsible, and we've stayed true to the concessions that we got during the recession. But at the end of the day, our expenses at the local level are just they're exceeding our revenue, our revenue coming in. And there's been a lot of changes in Lansing post-recession that have made that tougher. There's been and it's definitely not the representative's fault, don't take it that way, but there's been changes as far as the marijuana laws, the forfeiture laws, how we assess vacant buildings, personal property taxes. Those are all things that are local, that we built our local economies, or built our local government around, that we could serve our local economy. So those things have changed now as we enter into the COVID environment. We're probably not going to know at the local level exactly what long-term effect that's going to have on us. We were fortunate to have a good collection of our summer tax bills, but what I worry about is a year from now, with the businesses that have been closed and are operating at 25 or 50% capacity, are they going to have the ability to pay their property taxes this time next year? And that's just the businesses. Once you get into the residents, there's a lot of unemployment, there's a lot of other things. So I really worry about our city and other cities across the state of Michigan, if not just today, but a year from now. So as you can see, there's a lot going on at the local level that's affected, why the state shared revenue is such an important thing. The league's ongoing Save My City initiative have outlined several solutions to help right the ship. And I hate just to say what our problems are, but we want to offer some solutions. These recommendations have a lot of kinship with the recommendations released today by the Lincoln Institute. The league's recommendations are as follows. Number one, restores revenue sharing by fully funding the state statutory revenue sharing formula, increasing support for local communities by $600 million each year. Number two, change property tax laws by removing conflicts between the Headley Amendment and Proposal A to allow local government revenue to grow with the economy. Number three, provide more options for communities to fund critical services, including additional special assessment authority, expansion of local taxing authority, or grants for public safety. The income tax that Mayor Walker, or the Representative Heisinger mentioned, that his city of Walker instituted, is no longer a tool that's in the toolbox for communities to use to balance their budgets. Number four, reduce the cost of government by changing existing laws to discourage wasteful duplication of infrastructure and services, and equip local governments with tools to modernize legacy benefits. And I'll conclude with this. There's no question our state has repeatedly balanced its budget off the backs of our local communities. And I don't say this to criticize the current administration or the legislature. The systematic disinvestment in our communities goes back decades, involving multiple governors and multiple legislative bodies. I say it to explain that it needs to stop, or our communities will no longer be able to provide the quality services our residents and our businesses rely on and expect. Safe roads, drinking water, parks and recreation, senior support, and of course, police and fire protection. The Great Recession demonstrated how precariously our communities are positioned with our current finance system. The next recession could have disastrous consequences for the residents our cities, villages, townships, and counties serve. COVID-19 has certainly put a spotlight on the economic hardship communities are facing, but to be honest, we were heading towards a financial crisis before the current pandemic. We must act. We need our state partners to step up and help our communities. We're more than willing to be a partner in the recovery. We know that there's not one thing that's going to fix this. The representative and I had a conversation a couple of days ago where we agreed there's going to be no silver bullet that's going to solve this problem. So it's going to take all of us working together, and I think that we can do it. Thank you for allowing me to be part of this presentation today and the work of the Institute.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks to all of our presenters today. Now I want to have some opportunity for some Q&A. I do have a few questions. I want to start off with Jenna. And I do want to I know you want to clarify something too about the role Lincoln plays. I mean, you're not a lobbying organization, you're a research organization. I think you want to clarify kind of how you can assist on a go-forward basis, or how your organization can assist.
Yes, thank you. We cannot lobby, we're not allowed to, and we're not trying to. We're providing an independent, research analysis, comparing Michigan to other states and coming up with some recommendations. And, in terms of next steps, we are here as a resource for anyone who needs us. We have deep expertise in the property tax, in, local finance, and we can play the convener role. We can play the, continue to do more research. We want to help Michigan in whatever way people in Michigan think we can help. So just want to put that out there.
Jenna, while I got you, I'll follow up with one other question. Everybody on this call has talked about COVID. It's hard not to, right? Because it's sort of a overlay over everything we're dealing with. But most of the findings in this report were not based in or around the COVID crisis. I mean, it's exacerbating an already difficult circumstance. I just want to, I tried to turn that into a question. I guess it was more of a statement, but would you concur with or clarify that, or however you want to think about it?
I will concur. We started this research way before COVID started. And then COVID happened, and it just made it even more important for this research to be done, and for this message to get out that local governments are struggling, and they'll continue to struggle.
Thank you. Representative, the question I have for you is, what is the appetite for dealing with some of these issues in Lansing? It appears from the outside looking in that there seems to be more conversation, more willingness to admit we have an issue that, we all have a dog in this fight and it's something we need to address. But from an insider's perspective, how do you think the legislature views this right now?
Well, I think that there's no question that the legislature recognizes that there are deficiencies, and there are things that we can and should do to make things, to improve the financial situation on how that works. And as a testimony to that, by pulling together a work group, and frankly, we were very early on in saying, let's look at the entire process. We had fiscal analysts come in. We probably had 4 or 5 meetings, talked about what's working, what's not working, what are best practices, what are legislative changes, what kind of things are more budgetary. So I think that's a testimony to the fact that there is recognition that there are issues and, shall we say, opportunities for improvement. And as like I said, as a former local official, we know that this is critical, and there's no question the legislature sees this as something as a priority. But I think that, frankly, like you said, COVID has changed that and creating an immense amount of uncertainty. When it's unprecedented that we had 3 revenue estimating conference meetings this year. The first one, when it came out, was as dismal as you could expect. And in fact, I've essentially prepared 3 different budgets this year based on those different estimating conferences. So despite the fact that there is an appetite, it does come down to dollars. And there's no question that there's a correlation between how strong the economy is and how we can continue to fund all programs. And I guess that's why I just want you and everyone else to know that one of the big priorities is that we did not cut anything with revenue sharing. We kept it the same this year, and other programs did take those cuts. I've been a strong advocate for maintaining and growing, and in my mind, recognizing that there are deficiencies in the program, I always want to make sure that we can either maintain or grow revenue sharing, because I think sometimes there's a tendency to say, well, if there's extra dollars available, should we inject a bolus of funding towards a particular program? I think that would be wrong, because the local governments need to depend on that dollar and that dollar increasing or maintaining the same. And there's nothing worse than sliding backwards.
Yeah, and I on behalf of League, our members, I would thank the legislature for recognizing the key role that local government plays, especially now in this response. And unfortunately, there's no direct correlation between service demands and revenue streams like there might be in a business, right? So we're seeing higher than average, needs for services in a time when we're being more fiscally challenged. So recognizing that was something we very much appreciate. So I'll throw this one out, and Mayor, I don't know if you want to jump on it, but anyone can feel free to ask this one. This is from Mike Mallet of MERS. Local tax restrictions we're referring to, Headley Prop A, came out in the tax revolt of the 70s and 80s. What do you say to people who argue that taxes generally are too high?
I'll take the first swing at that, Tony. So obviously, anybody in local government, we hear that a lot. I think that we have to do a better job of explaining exactly where your taxes are going. And I can tell you that just in the city of Westland, that on a current summer tax bill, only about 30% of that money actually stays here in Westland. The rest goes out to multiple taxing jurisdictions that they go out for their own millages, and voters pass them, and they wonder why their taxes go up. I can tell you that in Westland, our tax bills are similar to what they were pre-recession. You know, that if you haven't sold your house, if you've seen your value of your house decrease during the recession, and you've seen it come back to post-recession numbers now, but your taxes have been, you know, protected, and so taxes now, I mean, we're delivering 2020 services on 2007 tax bills. So it does take some education, but I think overall, people always think that their taxes are too much. So you just have to explain where those taxes are going. You got to make sure that people are receiving value for their taxes.
I would just, thank you, Mayor. I would point out too that when you look at the data, I think when, you know, people feeling taxes are high is something that's kind of universal. Even those of us in local government sometimes feel that way. The reality is Michigan's gone from a high tax state to a lower tax state. And we're simply not tracking with the broader economy, which is really at the crux of the report that was being presented here is our system isn't keeping up. So
I'll just add to that is that nobody says my taxes are too low. That just doesn't
me included, by the way. So.
Yeah, I mean, myself also. But one of the things that we had in Walker, because there was there's a constant fight of where the dollars go and what are you doing with it? And we were frankly regularly criticized by, oh, gee, you take money from my income tax, and then you have, we pay our property tax, and people don't know where that money goes. So one of the things that I tried to do was regularly, on an annual basis, do what they call the total cost of ownership equation. And said, if you were the average family with an average size house and average deductions, what would your property tax look like? And what does your Walker income tax look like? And then we compared it to the cities around the metropolitan Grand Rapids area. And we were consistently on the lowest total cost of ownership. So I think it's complicated for taxpayers and for voters to understand this, but it really comes down to a different means to the same end and how you're actually collecting the dollars and what you're doing with it. So first and foremost, I think you can't over communicate to taxpayers where those dollars go.
Yep. Representative, I do a question regarding the income tax. You talked about the income tax in Walker. Are you hearing, or what are you hearing from your communities represent in this? This is a more COVID specific question, but some of the things that we're hearing is we're seeing decreases where that income tax was a stabilizing factor during the Great Recession, that maybe in this environment with unemployment and things in some areas creating issues. Are you hearing that, or issue?
You know, it's a difficult equation. It's a little bit like the state in the revenue estimating conferences based on productivity and revenue generated, but it's deeper than that, because last year's income tax obviously was based off of a very robust economy going on 10 years of a very strong economy. And when you file your tax return in April, whether it's the 15th for the federal, the 30th for the locals, the issue is that you're basing that on the previous years. And people also, depending on the income level, the higher income folks are still making estimated payments based on that projected income based off of last year's returns. And your locals are still, they're the unknown factor. So I think it's going to be an answer of it depends. It depends on the local economy. In the city of Walker, I think the economy has still been very strong. The issue is layoffs, are they long-term or short-term? Most of the layoffs that we've seen have frankly been short-term. You can drive down the roads in the communities, whether it's from Rockford, from Granville, all the way throughout the district, and see help wanted signs all over the place. I don't see there's any shortage of work. I guess the question is what it's going to really look like. And I think as a testimony to the complexity of what that looks like, when we saw the first correct report come out, it was dismal. And the second one was much better. And the third one actually showed pretty robust revenue. So these are multifactorial equations that it'd be very difficult to model. And I don't think there's an economic model out there that can accurately report the impact of COVID, especially considering the dynamic implications of a pandemic.
Mhm. I do want to circle back to the question about the Headley prop-based stuff. The solutions that are being recommended are not necessarily tax increases. It's fixing some of that structural problem, allowing rates to move up and down. It's not necessarily recommending a tax increase tomorrow or anything like that. So I just want to clarify that as well. It's recognizing that there's some structural problems present with that interaction of those constitutional amendments that's causing us issues. Matt, I'm going to reach out to you. Am I missing any questions here in the chat? I've been trying to monitor here as I'm going. Is there anything I've missed?
No, I think you got most of them. We're at 10:38. So unless there's any other questions, you probably could wrap it up.
Any parting comments from any of the panel before we wrap here?
I'd just like to say thank you to the Lincoln Institute for the good work they've done. It's always better to have more detailed information, and you've been able to shed a different perspective. So thank you for your good work there.
Yep. And I'd share the representative's kind words. So we really appreciate it. It's got some good data here. I think it helps us back at the Michigan Municipal League. I think it reinforces the work that we've been doing, and we'll definitely share it with our other board members. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate Rep. Heisinger and Mayor Wild joining this conference call. We appreciate it. And I did post something in the chat really quickly. I wanted to promote ourselves. We Lincoln Institute created a video, an explainer video, and hopefully it's fun and interesting to watch on YouTube about the mechanics of the property tax. And we have another one coming. I don't know the exact date of when it'll be ready, but that one really gets at why do we care about the property tax? What is it used for? Why is it a great tax?
Mm-hmm.
And so hopefully we can use those to help educate residents.
You don't often hear great tax in one sentence together. That was interesting. So.
We have a book called It's the Great Tax too.
Awesome. So, well, thank you to all of you for being a part of this today. Important topic and a lot of good information coming out. Thank you again to the Lincoln Institute for putting this together, and to the CS Mott Foundation for funding all of this research. So thank you all very much. That concludes our event today. Again, I'll remind everybody the links to the report are in the chat as well, along with the great tax video. So make sure you check all those out. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.